Asato ma sadagamaya tamaso homaham jyotirgamaya mrityormam amritam gamaya havir havir maedhi Rudra yate dakshinam mukha te namaham pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. And reach us through and through ourselves. And evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is a consideration of the 5 elements. It's a concept that was held in common by virtually all great wisdom traditions, the Hindus, the Chinese, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Aztecs, the Mayan civilization, the American Indians. And in order to appreciate this topic or to understand it, we've got to set aside all that we know about chemistry and the periodic table and physics class. And we have to try to get ourselves into the mindset of an ancient natural philosopher. He didn't have any telescopes. He didn't have any microscopes. He didn't have a computer. He didn't have science textbooks. He didn't have any books at all. And maybe we can visualize him seated under a tree in the forest. And he's contemplating a very age-old question of the Upanishads. And it was asked by a householder, Shaunaka. And he approached the sage Angaras, and he said, Kasmin nu bhagavo vigate sarvam idam vigatum bhavatiti. A famous question, thousands of years old, but it's a significance to us today. What is that by knowing which all this becomes known? That's what these natural philosophers at that time, not just one, were thinking about. What are things made of? What's the essence of all things? How can we understand what is this universe? Where did it come from? And so they began to ponder this question with nothing but their own minds and intuition and their direct experience. And so there's a philosopher. He's seated under a tree, and he's thinking about that question, what is everything made of? And he looks down, maybe he picks a flower, he smells the flower, and he's holding that, and he's sitting on the ground. And so he thinks, well, that's solid. Looks around, there's the trees, the flowers, rocks. A lot of things are yeah. Let's not think that's the what everything's made of. Let's call it earth. And all solid things, we'll just call it earth, because you can hear it, and you can touch it and taste it, smell it, you can see it, has all those properties. And so like this, he's beginning to think, this philosopher, and he looks down, he sees, well, now wait a minute, there's this water flowing in the stream, and that's not solid, that's not earth. And he thinks, well, yeah, there are a lot of other things too, which are more fluid, more liquid. And so let's put all them in a category and call them water. And in that category is everything which we can hear and we can feel, and which we can see, and which we can taste, but we can't smell it, because pure water, maybe if it's polluted, but pure water has no smell. And so they began continually thinking, what is the substance of which everything is made? And maybe he looked at the fire burning before him, keep him warm in the forest. And he thought, well, the flames of that fire, that doesn't fit either one of these categories. How can we explain it? Yeah, there are a lot of things which are like fire. So let me put all those things together conceptually into one set, which I'm going to call fire. And fire has properties. Well, you can hear it, crackling as it burns, and you can feel it, you can see it, but you can't taste it, and you can't smell it. Well, maybe you smell the smoke, but you can't smell the fire itself. And so like this, these ancient natural philosophers were thinking in this way, trying to figure it out. And maybe they thought then to themselves, feeling the breeze blowing through the trees. Yeah, there's another. What about this air? This air doesn't fit any of those categories that we have. We have to have another postulate, another fundamental element. And we're going to call it air. And air has certain properties. Well, we can hear it, we can feel it, but we can't see it, and we can't taste it, we can't smell it. So it's a kind of a different category. And then they began to think that, well, look up in the sky at night with all the stars and all the planets. What is it that is containing all of this? Well, it's just, didn't notice that. Well, that's just space. That's just room to move around in. So let us postulate another element. We'll call it space, akasha. Literally means sky. And the sky, the space, you can't feel it. You can't really see it. You can't taste it. You can't smell it. But you can hear. You can hear, because they believed that, well, the yogis discovered in ancient times, you can hear sounds in meditation which is not transmitted by the. It's not like we call sound waves. They didn't know about sound waves. That comes through the space, the element of space. So now we have 5 elements. ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And first thing we can think of these as 5 names. They're names of categories. For example, the category called fire contains everything that you can think of that is associated with fire, whether it's a physical thing, or it's a living thing, or imaginary, or an emotion, or a feeling, or anything you can, in your imagination, you can think that's like fire, that's fire-like, we're going to put into that set, which is called fire. And once we've done that, well, there's nothing left, because everything now has been sorted into 5 sets. That is 5 names. But these elements are not mere names. Rather, they are real, physical substances. And, well, we may even say that they are in particulate form. Because the Greek philosopher Plato, he determined that all geometric shapes in the universe could be reduced to 5 shapes. You know, I mean, like a pyramid or cube. There's 5 of them. 5 and only 5. So these substances are there, and they're called tattvas. Tattvas just means essential reals, essential real things that now we use to explain the universe. Now let's look as an example. Let's look at one of them, maybe the most interesting of them, called Akasha, space, ether. And when we look up into the sky at night, there we see that space, the last frontier, the final frontier. And we see the planets and the stars, and all of them are somehow contained in this. What is it that's between all the planets? Well, it's just space. It's just empty. This is nothing. We can't see anything there. And so we think, well, it's just nothing. It's just empty. But then we know, too, as we think a little as philosophers, that there's no such thing as absolute nothing. You can't say that nothing is something. So there must be something there. And maybe in modern science, they may say, well, it's like a quantum field. But in that quantum field, we know that there's a lot of stuff in the quantum field. And I don't know what's in there, but there's like quarks and strings, electrons, and subatomic particles. Maybe you can reduce them all to a numerical string of ones and zeros. But the claim of the yogis is that whatever subatomic particles you found in this ether, or what do you call this quantum vacuum, the claim is that all of them can be reduced to a fundamental element, a more fundamental element called Akasha. Call it space. Now, what is space? Well, space, we could say, is or Akasha. Let's say it's Akasha, but we're saying it's an element. See, so we can't wrap our brains around the word space. It's the fundamental matter. It's primordial matter. And this matter is What is matter? Well, matter is just that which is moved by force. And what is force? Well, that's that which moves matter. So we're kind of at rock bottom now to explain what everything is made. Everything is made, just imagine like a sugar cube. You have a cube of sugar, and then you crumble it up, and now you have granulated sugar. And then you crumble and pulverize that, and now you have powdered sugar. You scatter that in the air, it disappears. It has become, in other words, has become more and more granulated, more and more pixelated. And when you've done it to the ultimate extent, now you have akasha. That is, you have primordial matter. That's what we're talking about this morning. We're not talking about force or energy or prana. See, in this Sankhya cosmology, which is our framework this morning, there are two things. There's prana, which is primal energy, and then there's matter, which is akasha. And this morning we're not talking about prana and the evolutes of prana. We're only talking about akasha. And so there it is, little particles of space. Difficult for us to wrap our brains around it. Well, okay. Little particles of akasha, maybe they're not particles, because as we know from a high school science class, there's matter, and maybe the particles also behave like energy waves. So we can imagine a vast field of energy. That's the primal matter. That's primordial matter. That is, it's called akasha in Sanskrit. We're calling it space. And so that's the claim. Now let's look at the a lot of debates went on in ancient times as to which one of these elements was the most important. Which one of these elements was the primary element. And in ancient times, they discovered the progression. Tasmad va itasmad atmana akasha sambhutaha akashat vayuhu vayuragnihi agnerapa apa prithivi prithiva oshadaya oshadibhyo nam annat purushaha. Those are the old, I recite to you those old words. We had to memorize that in the monastery. I don't know all the Sanskrit verses. I only know a few important ones, so that's kind of an important one. And that tells you the progression. It's just saying, first there was the Atman, then there was primordial matter, akasha, then there was air, then fire, then water, then earth. Then the earth produced plants, which became food, and in the end, man appeared. So this is the progression. We can kind of give a more modernist interpretation of it, because we can think, okay, what you're saying is then, at the beginning, there's kind of the vast energy field. And then it became more and more dense. And that energy field became like air. And then it became hotter, like plasma. We could call it fire. And then it condensed and became liquid. And the vast soup of liquid particles floating in the universe came together and formed the planets and the stars, and thus we have Earth, Prithvi. That's the beginning, that's the end of the involution, and that's the beginning of the evolution. So the Prithvi has all the 5 qualities. It's a process of grossification. Now you have to be careful here, because it sounds like, okay, you're talking about matter, just goes through different states. That these 5 elements are naming states of matter. But that's not the way it is, because these are not states of matter, although they kind of sound that way, because each new element, each one is a new element, and they have an additional property. And it's because the element has a particular property that's associated with solidity and fluidity, not because it's a state of matter. So now these 5 elements are, this is a cosmology. This is called Sankhya cosmology. And now there's an ancient maxim in occult science, and that is that whatever is in the macrocosm is in the microcosm. It's a verse from the Upanishads, Yadeveha tadamutra tadamutra tadanveha. Whatever is here is there. Whatever is there is here. So if we can understand the macrocosm and the evolution, or technically the involution of the macrocosm, we can also understand the microcosm. That means ourself, our own body. And in fact, if we get the idea of these 5 elements and start thinking about them and the classification, how we've classified them in our mind, we can see very well that, yeah, our body also is marked by these categories. Certainly, we can say there is solid, bones and flesh, and tissue, skin and hair. Then there's liquid. That is our blood, lymph, flowing through the body, circulating through the body. And then certainly there is the fire element. In every cell of our body, there's metabolism. Metabolism is nothing there but energy production, which is just combustion. And so that's the fire in the body that digests our food and that creates energy for us to live. And air, well, we breathe, we're breathing in, we're breathing out. Oxygen in, cleansing our body with our breathing is part of our conscious living. And what about the element of space? Well, here we are standing, we're occupying space. We have body space. You know, the yogis believe that your body doesn't end with the skin covering. That your character and all of your thoughts and feelings emanate from your body like an aura. And there are different levels of aura around you that's all in your body space. So now, thinking in this way about the body in terms of the 5 elements and the 3 gunas and other, in ancient times in India, there developed a whole science of, Ayurveda, you've heard about that, the Indian science of medicine. It's all about the 5 elements and the 5 vayus, that means the pranas, the energies, and the 3 gunas. That's all the matrix from which that science emerged. There also emerged another whole body of study and ancient wisdom called Hatha Yoga, which is just the science of longevity and long life. And but we're spiritual aspirants, and that's not really our focus of our interest. Focus of our interest is more, how can I realize God? How can I realize my true self? So maybe we can now look more, change the focus here, and look at how these 5 elements play in the yogas. How they're integral parts of each of the yoga sadhanas. Now we can maybe begin here with bhakti yoga. Let's look at bhakti yoga. And you've heard the old Christian hymn, Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. And yes, we live here in this world, and we have many blessings that were given to us by God, who created this world. He created this world out of the 5 elements, which was his own body. And the very beginning of bhakti means love of God. The very baby step forward in bhakti is to begin to acknowledge and to appreciate and to think about and to feel some gratitude and thankfulness for what God has given us. For here we are standing on the earth. And the earth, what is the earth? We never think about the earth. But the earth is what the earth has given us. All the food, the plants that grow from the earth, brought our food and our sustenance, all from the bounty of the earth. In ancient times, they used to worship the Bhuvi Devi, or the Prithivi, or we call her Mother Earth. And that's right. We think about it. We are earthlings. We're born on the earth, and we live on the earth, and are sustained by the earth, and return in the end. So we can be thankful to the ground that the planet that we walk upon. And water. Well, just think about water. Well, if you want to drink water, you just go and get a drink of water, no problem. But what if you were out in the desert? You didn't have any water. And that would be the greatest thing in the world if someone were to just give you a glass of cool, clear water. What a wonderful thing. How will you appreciate it? Our bodies are 60% water. We've got to have water. And by the grace of God, this planet has got plenty of water. Other planets, they don't have a single drop. But here we have rivers and streams. And we have the water in the form of the god Varuna, who presides over the oceans, and the 2/3 of the earth, the oceans. And the water evaporates, goes in the sky, and falls as rain, and greens out the fields so that we can live. And what about fire? Well, for thousands of years, we don't ever think about fire, unless you go camping, maybe. But for thousands of years, 100,000 years, fire was the most precious thing in the world. Gives you heat, it cooks your food, protects you from wild animals, and is used to make tools. People used to worship the fire. It's called Agni. Agni carries the sacrificial fire, carries the offerings up to God in heaven. And Surya Deva, the sun, the fire in the sky, heats and warms the planet. We should feel a gratitude for God in the forms of fire. And what about air? Well, we never think about air. We just naturally breathe. We have no consciousness of breathing or the value of the air that we breathe. But it is true, if you go up in the mountains, you take a deep breath of fresh, clean air, and you can't help but say, oh, thank God for a breath of fresh air. We can't appreciate it here in Los Angeles. We breathe polluted air. Well, that's our karma. But Vayu, that is the God in the form of air, protects our whole planet from those terrible cosmic rays that would destroy us in a minute. And the whole atmosphere is like a blanket that protects us from the cold of outer space. Be thankful to Varuna. And the space in which we live, the space in which we move, we have room. You have room to move around. You get in your car and you drive somewhere. That's all due because God gave you space. If you didn't have space, you couldn't even move. So this is kind of a bhakti. Begin to feel a feeling of gratitude for God. And then we can look at any kind of worship of God, any ritualistic worship that we see in probably any religion, incorporates these 5 elements. And you go watch a worship service, and you'll see the priest will come in, and he'll light the incense. And you have light, and he'll have flowers, and he'll have food grown from the earth, fruits and flowers. And they'll light the candles, begin to chant sacred mantras. You hear these sacred sounds, the bell, the chamara will be waving an easy breeze of the air, and the smoke going up to heaven. So all of these are, the 5 elements are being offered to God. Now you may say, well, why would you offer God the 5 elements? He's the one who gave us the 5 elements. He's the one who is the 5 elements. What's the point of offering the 5 elements? Or those things which symbolize? And the idea is that, well, our minds and our hearts, we are attached to the things in the categories of the 5 elements. Those are the things, that's where our attention is. The objects of the senses, that's where all of our attention is. And if somehow we can take those objects, which we sorted into those categories, and we can offer them to God, in that way, symbolically, we're shifting our attention and our attachment from the object to God. So now we're thinking about God. And so that's the tantric method of worship, of focusing your senses and your attention on deity. Employ the 5 elements. Similarly, it was, I like the ceremony of the ancient American Indians. And we have an American Indian sacred circle, a medicine circle, in our shrine trail, Trabuco. And one Swami Vedarupananda, he was initiated into this Indian tribe. And so we conducted there a kind of a ceremonial where it employed, you see, you're giving your attention. In the sacred circle, or in the medicine wheel, it's interesting because each one of the elements is keyed into the directions. And when you do, you say your prayers, and you offer the smoke to the north. The north is the element of earth. And it's white. Because in the winter, cold winter months, the ground is white. And then they offer prayers to the south. The south is direction of fire. And the color is red because it's in the heat of summer that we feel the fire in the sky. And then they offer their prayers to the east. That's the direction of earth, air, fire, air. And, well, the rising of the sun. Its color is yellow. And it's going to symbolize the spring months, warm spring months. And then they offer to the west, which is the element associated there with the element of water. The color is black because the sun there sets. That's the time of the night. And the fall, the cool months of fall. So we can see it's kind of a poetic association of a lot of stuff is integrated in a spiritual, sacred worldview that's characterized and sorted by the 5 elements. Now let's look here at a little different. Let's look here at Raja Yoga. And when Raja Yoga, also, you begin Raja Yoga as a practice of meditation. Patanjali's Eightfold Path, first steps of the Eightfold Path are yama and niyama. And you begin by practicing purity. You have to purify. This is the first baby step. This is the first step in leading a meditative life, according to Patanjali, is purifying the elements. And that is in order to purify the elements. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can purify the earth element by eating good food. We can eat, by purity here, they mean tamas, rajas, and sattva. We can eat pure and sattvic food. Food that's nourishing and wholesome and that's healthful. And then we can purify the water element in our body, well, just by drinking plain water. See, yogis don't drink tea and coffee and the fruit juices, all the water and all that. That's all just added to water. All you drink is pure, clean water. Cool, clear water. That's Raja Yoga. That purifies the water element. And a fire? Well, maybe you could go out and be in the sun, soak up the sun. And that was a practice, you know, in the Western tradition. It's called naturopathy. It's interesting at the principles of naturopathy, a lot like Raja Yoga. In other words, these are very simple instructions. You don't have to get deep into the technicalities of Ayurveda and understand these simple instructions for purifying your body. Drink pure water. Breathe clean air. Take a deep breath of clean air and fresh air. Practice deep breathing. Long tradition in Western health culture. In India, it was carried to a whole different level called pranayama, and the control of the breath and the body, all part of the first steps of Raja Yoga. This is before you even begin to meditate. This is all preparation. And so this is beginning to purify the elements in the body. Purify the space. Well, how do they say you do that? Well, remember, space is associated with sound. And the way that we purify the space element within the subtlest part of ourself is to hear sacred sounds, chanting of mantras and prayers. That purifies the akasha element within our body. So let's look here. This idea of purification of the elements. Anybody have the time? What time is it?
11:45.
11:45. Okay, a few more minutes. Let's look here at the another tradition, which is not our tradition. It's called Kundalini yoga. And I'm going to mention it just because it's interesting in this context, because they talk a lot about purifying elements. And this form of yoga, they have the chakras, you know, the 7 chakras. And those chakras are associated with the 5 elements, from the lower to the higher. And begin with the earth element, the Muladhara, and then you go up a level. And each one of those chakras, there are esoteric, occult diagrams of the chakras, and they have Sanskrit letters written on them. And that's because in Sanskrit, you have 5 sets of phonemes. And each one of the sets of phonemes is integrated or is characterized, is caused by one of the 5 elements. And so when you go through the alphabet in progression form, then you go with earth, and the second set is going to be water, then fire. These are the fire letters. Now once you know that all of the sounds, each one of the sounds in the Sanskrit language causes a vibration of the element. Now we can understand what is written on those letters of the lotus, the petals in the chakras, and that we can, those are bija mantras, and if we chant those and intone those mantras, it'll cause a vibration which will purify the chakras. And we can purify and balance and harmonize the 5 elements in different levels of our body. So that's kind of an aside. That's Kundalini yoga. Now let's look here at Jnana yoga. We're kind of showing how these 5 elements appear in all these different forms of yoga practice. Jnana yoga, the path of knowledge and wisdom. Ultimately, the goal of the Sankhya's is the Purusha. The Purusha is pure consciousness, is to discriminate pure consciousness from nature. Now, everything in nature is a composite thing composed of 5 elements. So everything that's different from consciousness is 5. But consciousness is 1. This is the thinking of this is called vichara. The consciousness is 1, but everything else is 5. And I am the witness of the 5. Now what do they say? What do they mean there by saying it's 1? Do you mean it's 1 of the 5? The consciousness is 1 of the 5 elements? No. This is different from nature. That is, the whole account up to this point has been naturalism. Now we realize that the Sankhya is not naturalism, because there's a whole category of the Purusha and pure consciousness. And we can think, okay, it's 1. Now this is a 1 is a big word in the religion and spiritual practice. 1. What does 1 mean? In Vedanta, 1 is clearly defined as 1 only without a second. What does that mean? That means is that it is when we say it is 1, that is your consciousness, yourself. When we say it's 1, we say it's absolutely free from 3 kinds of difference. And these are enumerated here in the 2nd chapter of the Panchadashi, which is called discrimination of the 5 elements. And there it gives the analogy of a cow. They always use a cow. There's 1 cow in the field. Now what does that mean? Well, that means the cow is not a horse, it's not a sheep. So there's a cow. That is, it's free from, it's not different, a cow is different from something of another species. But when you say it's one cow, no, what do we mean? We mean there's only one cow. There's not many cows. That is, even of that species, there's only one individual. That's another meaning of the word one. But then they point out that no, that a cow has got horns and a tail and has got 4 legs. And so it is a composite thing. It has many parts. And the self also is free from that kind of difference. And therefore it's called one only without a second. I mention that because it's a very interesting analogy that's that simplifies vichara, that is discrimination, and in a simple way to realize that the pure consciousness is separate from the 5 elements. Now we're identified with the 5 elements. That is ourselves. So let's look here at the idea of all these things that you look around us, and we can see that everything around us is kind of, we can perceive divinity all around us. Now, what is divinity? Well, we can perceive it. And God has created this world, and God is a divine being. And everything that he has created, that means everything in the world, has the signature of the divine. We're standing on the earth. You stamp your feet on the earth. It's solid, it's hard, it's substance, it's substantial. And in fact, what is the Atman? What is the self? It is defined as the ground of being. So when you're standing on the ground, now you have you kind of know, yeah, what is substance? I'm looking for something substantial in my life. Well, you're standing on it. That's the ground. It's your perception of divinity. Similarly as water. See the water, you go over to a stream, you splash some water on your face, you kind of wake up a little bit, purify, cleanse your hands, purify your hands. That cleanliness, that feeling of purification, that kind of awakeness, these are all spiritual words that gives us our signatures of the divine being in the water. And what about the fire? Well, just look up in the sky. To see the fire in the sky, we can see that the source, Surya Deva, the source of all the vital energy and the heat and the light, and we can feel the energy. We can feel the warmth on our bodies. That's energy. You're feeling the energy. That's Surya Deva. And you're seeing light. Everywhere you see light reflected. God is nothing but light. That's a light being. These are all words that are about divine beings. And what about the air? Well, you take a breath of fresh air. You know the word Atman, which means yourself, your spiritual self, comes from an old Indo-European root, which means to breathe. And so breathing your air, that's your spirit. That's the earliest concept. But what is spirit? It's the air that you breathe, your respiration. That's the Atman. That's the so you're perceiving the self in the form of that. And what about you're there outside, you're walking along, you got space, you throw your arms up in the air, throw your arms out, you got plenty of room to move, you feel freedom. That freedom you feel, because you have space to move, that's spiritual feeling. These are all perceptions of the infinite in everyday life. Through the medium here of the 5 elements, although we're perceiving it through our senses and through our mind, it's true, but still, the source there is a divine source. And we can remember how the story about in ancient times, there was a sage. In the Uddhava, it's called the Uddhava Gita. And the sage was walking through the forest. His name was Dattatreya. And he was happily, joyfully thinking of his true nature, his self. And he met there a king, Yadu. And Yadu saw him and he says, "Oh, you're so happy. Who is your guru?" You see, this king also is a spiritual aspirant. He wanted some advice. Who was your guru? And the Avadhuta, he said, "Well, my guru is the Atman, is my own true self. That's my guru. But in addition to that, my guru, I have had 24 upagurus. That means secondary teachers, mentors." And then he goes on to tell the stories of what he's learned from nature. And he begins with the 5 elements. And he says that, well, from the earth, I learned patience. I learned how to bear and to forbear. And to do good to all beings. And from the water, I learned gentle persistence. That is, water it's very soft and it doesn't resist anything. It's yielding to everything, and yet it can cut through the hardest stone. And from fire, I learned, this is the Avadhuta, he's speaking there about what he learned from all the things in his guru. From fire, he learned about tapas. Tapas just means heat that's generated by austerity, and the importance of doing spiritual austerity that generate heat that burn up your ignorance. And from the air, he said, I learned detachment. The air comes and goes in one place, it moves to another place, but it never gets attached to anything. And it may be filled with dust and with clouds, but it itself, the air itself, is untouched. And from space, I learned to employ your mind like this empty space of a mirror, and you don't grasp, not grasping, not refusing, accepting everything, no judgment. The self is like space. So here we have some reflection on the 5 elements. And we've talked about, maybe hypothetically, how we came to understand those elements and how they're integrated into cosmology, and how they help us to explain a lot about our own physiology, that is about the macrocosm and the microcosm. And how they help us to appreciate and to develop gratitude and thankfulness for God, how they enable us to worship God more effectively, and how we can modify our lifestyle to purify the elements in our body. And how ultimately our goal is to make the final discrimination between our true self, that is to transcend our body and mind, and to identify with the pure consciousness, the Purusha, which is the witness, the observer of all compound things. And so this is our spiritual practice relating to the 5 elements.
Thank you, Swami Vedarupananda for a very interesting talk on the 5 elements. The Swami stays at Swami Vivekananda house in South Pasadena, where Swami Vivekananda himself lived for about 4 weeks, and it's a place of pilgrimage. You can talk to the Swami about how to visit. After the talk, he will be going to the greenhouse living room next to the bookshop for questions and comments. I'm sorry to tell you that our bookshop is closed today. Our person in charge of the bookshop is not well, so we can't open it today. We do have refreshments. Next week, our speaker will be Swami Mahayogananda, and his topic, Blessed are the Peacemakers. In February, we have a number of events coming up. The first weekend, we'll be celebrating Swami Vivekananda's birthday. The second weekend, Swami Brahmananda's birthday. The third weekend, we'll have 4 visiting monks and 4 visiting nuns. And we're going to have a program on Saturday on Swami Vivekananda, celebrating the 125th year of his visit to Los Angeles. So that's coming up on the 24th of February, Saturday. Everyone will be fed afterwards. It'll be a nice gathering. I think that's about it. If this is your first time here, most welcome. We do this every Sunday.
Om Dyo Shanti Antariksha Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Yeah, join us in the green room for comments or pushback. Disagreement.